most expensive restaurant in New York City, Aperture, has 20-foot-tall windows, 70 tables, and 3 emergency exits. To Maeve, it also had 14 potential weapons, 8 fatal choke points, and 1 customer who was about to turn the entire dining room into a war zone. When 5 armed men shattered the glass, they weren't expecting the waitress clearing their target's plates. They saw a 15-an-hour employee in a cheap apron. What they didn't see was the woman who had spent a decade dismantling organizations just like theirs, and the specialized skills she was about to use with a silver serving tray. The sound that defined Maeve's life at Aperture wasn't the polite chatter of the city's elite or the distant, muffled symphony of Central Park traffic 70 floors below. It was the near-silent shush of her rubber-soled, non-slip shoes on the polished Italian marble. It was the sound of invisibility, a sound she had spent 8 months perfecting. For 8 months, Maeve had been the perfect ghost. She was Maeve, the quiet but efficient waitress. She was the one who remembered that the wife of real estate mogul Robert Gregory preferred her Evian, with no ice and a single, muddled mint leaf, and that Judge Peterson was deathly allergic to all shellfish, a fact his young, distracted mistress often forgot when trying to order the lobster bisque. She was precise, detached, and utterly forgettable. It was, by a significant margin, the most difficult, grueling, and soul-crushing job she had ever had. Tonight, a wet Tuesday in November, the restaurant was humming with the low, confident thrum of old money and new tech. Aperture was a glass box in the sky, a monument to the egos of those who could afford the $800 per person tasting menu. Its existence was an act of architectural arrogance. Maeve moved through it with an economy of motion that her floor manager, Mr. Henderson, praised as professional. Maeve called it low profile. Her mind, as always, worked on 2 separate tracks. The public track, Track A, was focused on table settings, wine pairings, the timing of the entrees, and maintaining a posture of polite subservience. The private track, Track B, the real track, was constantly, compulsively running threat assessments. Mr. Henderson at the host stand. Posture, slumped, defeated. Stress level, high. He keeps touching his left cufflink, a nervous tell. Financial trouble, a potential security risk. Noted. Table 12. 4 bankers from Goldman Sachs. Loud, arrogant, drunk on a $4,000 bottle of Romane Conti. One is showing off a new watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold. Valued at $120,000. Potential for a simple snatch and grab. Low threat, high-value target. Kitchen exit, partially blocked by a rolling cart of dirty linens. A violation of fire code and basic tactical sense. She'd told Henderson about it 3 times this week. He'd forgotten. Again. A critical choke point. This constant, silent analysis was a reflex, a deep tissue scar left from a life she had supposedly abandoned in a fiery wreck outside of Minsk 3 years ago. In that life, she hadn't carried trays. She had carried a customized Sig Sauer P226 and the weight of government secrets. In that life, her name hadn't been Maeve. She was polishing a Zolto wine glass at the service bar when the quiet equilibrium of the restaurant shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure change, a drop in the room's barometric confidence. The main doors opened and a chill of pure, frictionless entitlement swept in. "Mr. Pierce, so good to see you," Henderson groveled, his slumped posture snapping artificially straight, a puppet pulled by strings of money. Maeve didn't need to look. Arthur Pierce. She'd seen his face on the cover of Forbes, the titan of tomorrow. Wired. The man who owns the AI that owns the future. And Time, the new face of power. He was the CEO of Apex Dynamics, a $1 trillion company that specialized in private aerospace and, more quietly, predictive AI for global defense contracts. He was 40 years old, impossibly handsome in a severe, joyless way, and radiated an aura of power so dense it was almost suffocating. He was flanked by two men. They were large, broad-shouldered, and dressed in suits that were expensive but badly tailored, the fabric straining to conceal the hardware underneath. Security, Maeve's Track B, labeled instantly. Bodyguards, complacent, lazy. One is wearing a clear coil Bluetooth earpiece, but he's not listening. He's scanning the female clientele with a predatory gaze. The other is too focused on Pierce, not on the room. Amateurs. Hired for size, not skill. "My table," Pierce stated, not asked. He didn't look at Henderson, his attention fixed on the glowing screen of his phone. "Of course, sir. Your usual booth." The usual booth was booth 7, the most secluded in the restaurant, with a panoramic view of the park. It was in Maeve's section. She sighed internally. Pierce was a notoriously terrible tipper. He often forgot, and was relentlessly demanding. He treated the staff like malfunctioning robots. As he slid into the high-backed velvet booth, he tossed his heavy cashmere overcoat onto the seat beside him, without looking, forcing Maeve to step back quickly to avoid being hit in the chest. "Good evening, Mr. Pierce," Maeve said, her voice a perfect, bland monotone. Track A was now dominant. "Can I get you some water to start?" "Sparkling. Norwegian. Voss. No lemon, no ice. And tell the chef I want the bison, medium rare. Don't bother me with the menu. I'll be working." He still hadn't looked up from his phone. "And for your guests, sir?" The two bodyguards settled into the adjacent booth, a strategic but poorly executed attempt to cover their client. "They'll have whatever," Pierce dismissed with a wave. Maeve's eyes flicked to the bodyguards. The one she'd labeled lazy gave her a greasy smirk. "Just bring us 2 steaks, big ones, well done, and a bottle of your most expensive scotch. Put it on his tab." Maeve nodded, her expression unreadable. "Well done, steak. He's a tourist, not a professional. He just destroyed a $300 cut of meat." She turned to go, but Pierce's voice, sharp and cold as a shard of ice, stopped her. "Waitress." She turned back. "Sir?" He finally lifted his head, and his blue Arctic cold eyes met hers. They were the eyes of a man who had never been told no, a man who bought and sold countries before his morning coffee. "My phone is at 14%. Bring me a power bank, one of the new MagSafe ones, not the old-style cable, and be quick about it." He didn't ask. He commanded. For a flicker of a second, the old Maeve, the one who had leveled syndicates and deposed warlords, wanted to tell him exactly where he could plug his power bank. But Maeve the waitress simply nodded. "Immediately, sir." She walked toward the back office, her shoes making their silent shush on the marble. As she passed the bar, she glanced out the 20-foot-tall floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of the park was obscured by a driving November rain. But something else, far below, caught her eye. Down on 60th Street, a black utility van, a Mercedes Sprinter, no side windows, illegal tint, was double-parked, its engine running. It was too clean for a delivery van, and it was angled toward the service entrance, not the main entrance. Her pulse, normally resting at a near meditative 50 beats per minute, gave a single, hard kick. She slowed her pace, her gaze sweeping the room again, but this time with a new, razor-sharp urgency. Track B was no longer in the background. It took over, hijacking her nervous system. Sprinter van, tactical position. Seats 5 to 7. Bodyguards are distracted. One is already drinking the scotch. Pierce is isolated in the back booth. Main entrance. A fatal funnel, easily blocked. Service exit, locked from the outside after 10 p.m. Kitchen exit, still blocked by that damned linen cart. We are in a box, A glass box, 70 floors up. She felt a cold prickle, the all-too-familiar sensation of a sniper's laser dot on the back of her neck. This wasn't a what-if anymore. This was a when. She diverted from her path to the charging station and walked directly to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice low and tight. "Not now, Maeve. I'm comping the Petersons' champagne. The kitchen exit is still blocked. That cart needs to be moved right now." Henderson looked at her, his face flushing with annoyance. "It's linens, Maeve. It can wait. Mr. Pierce needs his power bank." "It's a fire hazard," she insisted. Her voice dropped a full degree, losing its customer service politeness and gaining an edge of serrated steel that made Henderson blink, confused. "Fine," he snapped, bristling at her tone. "I'll tell Ben to move it. Go get the charger." Maeve knew telling Ben was useless. Ben was a 19-year-old busboy who was currently hiding in the walk-in freezer, texting his girlfriend. She made a decision. She walked directly into the kitchen, a chaotic symphony of clanging pans, hissing steam, and shouting chefs. "Move this," she ordered the nearest line cook, gesturing to the heavy linen cart. "I'm on plating, Princessa. You move it," he sneered. Maeve didn't argue. She grabbed the handle of the 400-pound steel cart and, with a controlled, powerful shove that seemed utterly incongruous with her slender frame, rammed it 10 feet clear of the doorway. She used her legs and core, a perfect deadlift. The cart smashed into a stack of empty crates. The busboy and the line cook stared, their mouths open. She turned back toward the dining room, wiping her hands on her apron. And that's when the world exploded. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the synchronized, percussive thump, thump, thump of 5 heavy-duty, spring-loaded window breakers shattering the massive, 2-inch-thick pane of glass nearest to Arthur Pierce's booth. The rain and the wind of the 70th floor gale blasted into the restaurant, a sudden, violent intrusion of the outside world. Tablecloths were ripped from tables, flames on the decorative candles were instantly extinguished, and the sound of 1,000 wine glasses shattering on the marble floor was drowned out by the sudden, high-pitched screams of the city's elite. It was pure, primal chaos. Robert Gregory, the real estate mogul, dove under his table, pulling his wife down with him. Judge Peterson fainted. Mr. Henderson froze, his mouth open in a silent, "Oh!" a champagne bottle held uselessly in his hand. But Maeve's world went silent. The screams faded, the wind became white noise. Track B had taken complete control. Her mind wasn't panicking, it was processing, the world slowing down into a series of tactical frames. Total entry time, 2.1 seconds, 5 assailants, dressed in black tactical gear, full body armor, black ballistic masks, no insignia. Professional. This is not a robbery. This is an extraction. The 5 men moved like a single organism, a black tide flowing into the room through the shattered window. They ignored the screaming patrons. They ignored the Patek Philippe watch. They ignored the cash registers. They moved in a perfect rolling T formation, a high-level infantry tactic. Numbers 1 and 2, point, move directly to secure the target. Numbers 3 and 4, flank, secure the perimeter and neutralize immediate threats. Number 5, rear, provides overwatch and blocks the entry point. It was textbook. It was clean. It was the exact doctrine she herself had drilled into recruits in a concrete bunker in the Negev desert. The amateurs, Pierce's bodyguards, finally reacted. The lazy one fumbled inside his oversized jacket, his eyes wide with a mixture of scotch and sheer terror. He was trying to pull his weapon, a bulky .45, but his hand snagged on the lining of his cheap suit. He never cleared the holster. Assailant 3, the left flank, moved without looking. His weapon was up, a short-barreled rifle, an HK-433, suppressed, a soft, wet fut-fut-fut. 3 rounds, center mass. The bodyguard was thrown backward into his table, scattering plates of well-done steak. He was dead before the scotch bottle he'd knocked over finished spilling onto the floor. The other bodyguard, the one who had been watching Pierce, actually managed to draw his pistol. "Get down, sir," he yelled, making the fatal mistake of standing up to provide a target, trying to be a hero. A fatal mistake, Maeve thought. You never stand up. You make yourself a smaller target, not a bigger one. Assailant 4, the right flank, didn't even bother with his rifle. He pivoted, raised a sidearm from his thigh rig, and fired a single, precise shot. The pop was barely audible over the wind. The second bodyguard collapsed onto his own booth's table, a neat, dark hole in his forehead. The entire neutralization of Pierce's multi-million-dollar security detail had taken less than 4 seconds. Arthur Pierce himself was frozen, his phone still held loosely in his hand. He was staring at the blood pooling on the white linen of the bodyguard's table. The man who controlled global markets was, for the first time in his adult life, utterly and completely powerless. "Target is secure," shouted Assailant 1, the leader. His voice was a muffled, Eastern European bark through his mask. He and Assailant 2 grabbed Pierce by his arms, yanking him from the booth with brutal efficiency. Assailant 2 snapped a heavy-duty zip tie around Pierce's wrists. "No, no! What is this? Do you know who I am? I'll pay you. I'll pay you double, triple," Pierce stammered, his arrogance shattered, replaced by the ugly, raw fear of a man who buys his way out of problems, realizing this one wasn't for sale. "Shut up, package," Assailant 1 growled. He pressed the muzzle of his rifle to Pierce's temple. "Move or I bleed you." The other 2 assailants, 3 and 4, were now scanning the room, their weapons sweeping menacingly over the cowering patrons. "Comms, go dark! 30 seconds to extraction!" The leader yelled to his rear guard, Assailant 5, who was planting a small black device on the wall near the broken window. A wide-spectrum signal jammer, Maeve analyzed. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no police calls. They're cutting the restaurant off from the world before they rappel down. It was all happening in a terrifyingly small window of time. The entire operation, from breach to extraction, was planned for under 1 minute, and they were all, to a man, ignoring the waitress. Maeve stood by the now clear kitchen entrance, partially obscured by a large, potted ficus tree. She hadn't moved, she hadn't screamed, she hadn't hidden. She was just watching. The attackers saw her, but their brains, processing thousands of bits of data, categorized her in the same bucket as the cowering busboy and the frozen Mr. Henderson. Civilian, female, non-threat, ignore. Assailant 4, the one who had shot the second bodyguard, even gestured at her with his rifle. "On the floor! Now! Face down! Hands on your head!" he yelled, his attention already moving past her. Maeve slowly, carefully, began to lower herself to her knees. Her hands went up in the universal sign of surrender. "Please," she whimpered, her voice trembling, a perfect imitation of terror. "Please don't hurt me." The attacker, his name was Kovac, grunted, satisfied. He turned his back to her, focusing on the other patrons huddling behind the bar. He had just made the last mistake of his life. The second his back was turned, Maeve's entire demeanor changed. The fear evaporated. The whimpering stopped. Her movements, once slow and trembling, became impossibly fluid. She was still holding the thick, heavy, leather-bound menu for Table 9. In a single, silent motion, she rose from her knees. She did not stand. She uncoiled. She took 2 predator-like steps, closing the 10-foot distance between them. The attacker was scanning the bar. Threat. 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 He never saw the real threat. Maeve brought the heavy, leather-bound menu up in a two-handed upward-arcing strike. She didn't aim for his head, which was protected by a ballistic helmet. She aimed for the base of his skull, right at the C2 vertebrae, the hangman's fracture. She used her entire body weight, pivoting on her heel in a perfect application of rotational physics. There was a sickening, wet crunch that was audible even over the wind. The 250-pound man, encased in 40 pounds of body armor, dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. He didn't make a sound. His spinal cord was severed. He was dead. The entire action had taken 1.2 seconds. It was completely silent amidst the ambient chaos of the wind and the whimpering guests. The leader, Assailant 1, was dragging Pierce toward the broken window. "Kovac, what's your status? Cover the rear," he yelled to the man she had just killed. There was no answer. "Kovac!" The leader turned. His eyes, visible behind the slits of his ballistic mask, widened in confusion. He saw his man down, and standing over him, breathing calmly, was the waitress. She was holding a menu. "What the—" Before he could finish the thought, Maeve was already moving. She didn't run at him. That would be stupid. She was unarmored, and he had a rifle. Instead, she ran away from him, toward the service bar. "Target loose!" the leader screamed, shoving Pierce hard at Assailant 2. "Drop her! Anton, drop her now!" Assailant 3, the one who had killed the first bodyguard, spun, bringing his rifle to bear. His name was Anton. He saw the waitress, a fast-moving, black-clad blur, vaulting over the marble bar with the grace of an Olympic gymnast. Foot, foot, foot. He fired a 3-round burst, but he was shooting at where she was, not where she was going. The rounds impacted the marble bar top, sending chips of stone flying. Maeve was now behind the bar. She was in her element. She had cover, and more importantly, she had weapons. "Flush her out," the leader ordered. "We're blowing the window in 10. Anton, Assailant 3, advanced on the bar, his rifle ready. "Come out, little girl," he taunted, his voice laced with a thick Russian accent. He reached the bar and peered over, expecting to find her cowering in the ice bin. Maeve, however, was not there. She was low, having skittered down the length of the bar like a crab. She popped up 10 feet to his left, at the cocktail station. He turned, surprised, but she was faster. She had 2 weapons in her hands. In her left, a heavy, galvanized steel ice scoop. In her right, a pressurized canister of whipped cream. He tried to aim his rifle, but she was too close, inside his turning radius. She discharged the whipped cream canister directly into his face mask. The high-pressure fume of nitrous oxide and processed cream hit his visor. He recoiled, momentarily blinded, clawing at his mask, sputtering. It was all the time she needed. She stepped inside his firing arc and swung the steel ice scoop like a hatchet. The pointed, heavy edge struck his wrist, right on the ulnar nerve. His hand spasmed open, and he dropped his rifle. He roared in pain and surprise, lashing out with his free hand. But Maeve was already gone. She ducked under his wild swing, kicked his fallen rifle across the floor, and, in one fluid motion, drove the heel of her palm straight into his nose. It wasn't a punch. It was a tactical strike. She felt the cartilage and bone give way, driving upward. He collapsed, joining his comrade on the floor. 2 down. 3 to go. Across the room, the remaining 3 attackers, the leader, the one holding Pierce, and the rear guard at the window, were staring in mute, absolute horror. The algorithm of their multi-million-dollar mission had just encountered a variable it could not compute. "It's her!" The rear guard, Assailant 5, shouted, his voice cracking with a fear that hadn't been there a moment before. He pointed a trembling armored finger. "Dmitri! It's Koshka!" Koshka. The cat. A name she hadn't heard in 5 years, a name she thought she had buried in Belarus. The leader, Dmitri, dropped his professional bark. His voice became a low, venomous hiss. He raised his rifle, ignoring Pierce completely. His primary mission had just changed from extraction to survival. Kill her! Kill Koshka! Arthur Pierce, billionaire, CEO, and the package was now completely forgotten, shoved to the floor. He watched, his mind unable to process what was happening, as the 3 remaining military-grade assassins took aim at the waitress. The equation of the room had changed. It was no longer a kidnapping. It was a hunt. Dmitri, the leader, was no fool. He wasn't Anton or Kovac. He was a professional, and he had just identified a professional-grade threat. He barked an order in Russian. "Mikhail, clear the kitchen! Nico, set the charge and cover the floor. She's mine!" Divide and conquer, Maeve's mind supplied. Standard procedure. He's trying to box me in. Mikhail, assailant 2, shoved Pierce to the ground, pulling his sidearm. He began a slow, careful advance toward the bar and the kitchen entrance. Nico, assailant 5, moved back to the broken window, pulling a block of C4 and detonators from his pack. Dmitri, assailant 1, took cover behind an overturned marble table, using it as a firing position, his rifle trained on the main dining room. They had retaken the tactical initiative. Maeve was still behind the bar, but it was no longer safe. Mikhail was advancing, and Dmitri had a clear line of sight. She had to move. "Please," a voice whimpered from beside her. Maeve looked down. Mr. Henderson was cowering in the glass wash station, shivering. They're going to kill us!" "Stay down. Don't move. Don't make a sound," Maeve ordered, her voice flat and cold, all traces of the waitress gone. She needed a distraction. Her eyes scanned the bar. She saw the bottle of $4,000 Romane Conti that the bankers had ordered. She grabbed it. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice ringing out, drawing Mikhail's attention. He spun toward her, raising his pistol. Maeve was already in motion. She threw the bottle, not at him, but at the wall of single malt scotches 20 feet away. The bottle exploded, showering the marble floor in expensive wine. But the sound, a gunshot-like crack, did its job. Mikhail flinched, firing 2 rounds at the sound. In that split second of distraction, Maeve was gone. She vaulted back over the bar, landing in a silent crouch on the other side. She didn't run into the open. She ran low, using the line of overturned tables and terrified frozen patrons as human shields. "Where is she?" Dmitri roared. I lost her!" Mikhail yelled, moving forward to where the bottle had broken. Maeve was already at the kitchen entrance, the one she had cleared just minutes before. She slipped through the double swing doors like smoke. She was now in her real territory. The kitchen was still in chaos. The staff, hearing the breach and the gunshots, had either fled into the pantries or were huddled in the corners. The hiss of the gas ranges, the bubbling of the deep fryers, and the clatter of the industrial dishwashers created a wall of disorienting sound. She heard the thud of the swing doors opening behind her. Mikhail. He was following her in. He was stupid, but he was committed. Good, she thought. You never follow a high-value target into their prepared kill zone. Rule number 1. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the blue pilot lights of the stoves and the red exit signs. Maeve moved with a silence that was terrifying, her shush-shush shoes now a lethal advantage. Mikhail entered, his pistol up, a small flashlight beam cutting through the steam. "I know you're in here, Koshka," he called out. "Dmitri sends his regards. He says you should have stayed dead." His beam swept the room, illuminating hanging copper pots, racks of knives, and slabs of raw meat. Maeve was not on the main floor. She was above him. When she'd entered, she had used the shelving for the flour bags to boost herself up, onto the massive stainless steel hood vent that ran the length of the cooking line. She was now lying flat on the metal, 10 feet above him, the heat from the stoves warming her back. Mikhail advanced slowly, sweeping his light. He passed the prep station, the grill, and moved toward the dish pit. He passed directly underneath her. Maeve waited. 1 beat. 2 beats. Now. She dropped. She didn't just fall, she aimed. She landed with both feet on his shoulders, her 130 pounds multiplied by gravity, driving him face first onto the hard tile floor. His pistol skittered away, clattering into the darkness. The impact was brutal. He grunted, the wind knocked out of him. But he was a professional, armored and tough. He rolled instantly, trying to grab her legs. He was fast, but she was faster. Maeve was already on her feet. She grabbed the first thing her hand found on the prep station, a heavy-toothed meat tenderizer. Mikhail roared, pulling a 10-inch combat knife from his chest rig. He lunged, a disarm and slash maneuver. Maeve didn't retreat. She stepped into the attack. She used the meat tenderizer not as a club, but as a shield, catching his knife-wielding wrist on the heavy steel. The clang of metal on metal echoed in the kitchen. With her other hand, she grabbed his helmet, yanking his head down. At the same time, she brought her knee up in a devastating strike, not to his face, which was masked, but to his armored collarbone. The force was enough to stagger him, breaking his balance. He stumbled back, right against the deep fryer station. His back hit the steel vats. He momentarily froze, realizing his mistake. Maeve didn't hesitate. She grabbed the handle of the nearest fryer basket, which was filled with sizzling, 400-degree oil. With a guttural yell, she pulled it from the vat and flung the contents directly at his face. The high-pitched, inhuman scream was cut short as the boiling oil found the gaps in his mask and helmet, melting the ballistic fibers and his skin beneath. He convulsed, clawing at his face, his knife clattering to the floor. Maeve stepped forward and, with a single, sharp, downward strike, brought the meat tenderizer down on the side of his neck. He crumpled, his seizures stopping instantly. 3 down, 2 to go. She stood for a second, her chest heaving, the acrid smell of burnt oil and flesh filling her nostrils. The monster was awake. Koshka was back. She stooped and retrieved Mikhail's sidearm, a Glock 19, heavily customized. She checked the magazine. Full. She racked the slide, chambering around. The tactical equation had just shifted again. She walked to the kitchen door, now armed. She paused, listening. She heard Dmitri shouting, "Nico, status!" "Charges set. 30-second timer. We're leaving." A bomb? Maeve's blood ran cold. They're not repelling. They're going to blow the whole floor. "Forget the timer," Dmitri roared. "Mikhail is gone. She's armed. This is a clean slate op. Light it up. We go now." "But Dmitri, the package," Nico protested. "Forget the package. Forget everything. Blow it." Maeve's eyes widened in horror. They weren't just killing her. They were going to kill everyone. Pierce, Henderson, the bankers, Judge Peterson, all 70 people in the restaurant. She kicked the kitchen door open and stepped back into the dining room, raising her new pistol. "Going somewhere?" she called out. The dining room had descended into a new kind of terror. The wind and rain still howled through the broken window, a gaping wound in the side of the skyscraper. The remaining patrons were no longer just whimpering. They were sobbing, praying. Dmitri and Nico were at the broken window. Nico, the tech specialist, was holding a small black detonator in his left hand. His other hand held a pistol, trained on the room. Dmitri had his rifle up, aimed directly at the kitchen door. "So," Dmitri's voice echoed, amplified by the wind, "the little cat has claws." Arthur Pierce was on the floor near them, his hands zip-tied. He had finally stopped babbling. He was just staring at Maeve, his billion-dollar brain unable to compute the scene. The waitress, his waitress, was holding a pistol, her apron splattered with something. "You're not taking him," Maeve said, her voice steady. She took a half step out from the doorframe, using it for cover. Dimitri actually laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "Take him. You think we're here for him?" He gestured dismissively at the billionaire on the floor. "This baggage? He's nothing. He's a lure, a piece of cheese in a trap." Maeve felt that familiar, cold prickle on her neck again. But this time it was colder. "A trap? For who?" "For you, Koshka," Dimitri sneered. "Or should I say, Maeve, Agent 714, designation Koshka, asset of the SVR's Special Projects Division. Went rogue 3 years ago. We've been looking for you ever since." Pierce's head snapped around, his eyes wide. "Agent!" "Shut up," Nico barked, kicking him in the ribs. Maeve's mind was racing, recalculating everything. "You knew I was here. You knew I was at this restaurant." "We didn't know exactly," Dimitri said, clearly enjoying the monologue. He was buying Nico time, but time for what? "We just knew you were in New York, and we know your profile. You can't help yourself. You hide, but you watch. You pick a place with a high-value target, a senator, a judge, a billionaire CEO, and you embed. You watch them, you study them, because it's the only thing that makes you feel safe." He was right. "So," he continued, "we arranged a little performance, a high-stakes, public extraction. We knew Pierce's company, Apex Dynamics, was a juicy enough target to be believable. We knew an operation this loud, this violent, would, how do you say, activate you. We just had to see which waitress, which busboy, which chef would be the one to kill 3 of my best men with kitchen supplies." The full, horrifying weight of the revelation landed on her. The 5-man team, the breach, the jammer. It was the most expensive, elaborate, find and flush operation in history. Arthur Pierce wasn't the target. He was the bait. "And now you've found me," Maeve said, her voice dangerously quiet. "And now we clean the slate," Dimitri said. "General Volkov sends his personal regards. He hates loose ends." Volkov. The name hit Maeve like a physical blow. General Ivan Volkov, her old handler, the man who had trained her, the man who had turned her into a monster, the man she had betrayed when she refused to carry out his last order. The assassination of a child. "He's going to kill us all," Maeve said, her eyes flicking to the detonator in Nico's hand. "There are 74 people on this floor, Koshka," Dimitri said. "Volkov considers that an acceptable loss to remove you from the board. You, of all people, should understand." He was right. She did understand. That's what terrified her. "No," Maeve said. "The mission's over. You failed." "We found you, didn't we?" Dimitri smiled. "Nico, end this." Nico lifted the detonator, his thumb moving to the red button. "No more time," Maeve's brain screamed. She fired. She didn't aim for Nico. He was too far, and the wind was too strong. She aimed for the man closest to her, the one who was cowering behind the bar, the one who was no longer a civilian, but a piece of the puzzle. She shot Mr. Henderson. The bullet from her Glock struck the marble bar just inches from Henderson's head, sending a spray of stone chips into his face. "Ah!" he screamed, jumping up from his hiding spot in pure animal terror. "Now!" Dimitri yelled, thinking Maeve was shooting at him. But Henderson hadn't just jumped up. He had jumped up and run, right into the path between Dimitri and Maeve. "Get down, you fool!" Dimitri roared. It was the opening she needed. With Henderson acting as a momentary, accidental human shield, Maeve broke from her cover. She ran, not at Dimitri, but to her right, along the wall. Dimitri shoved Henderson to the floor and tracked her with his rifle. Phut, phut, phut. Bullets chewed the drywall behind her. She was fast, but he was leading his target. One round grazed her arm, a white-hot sear of pain. She didn't slow down. Nico, seeing her closing the distance, panicked. He dropped the detonator, which was attached to his vest by a lanyard, and drew his pistol. He fired wildly. Maeve dove, rolling behind a heavy velvet couch. She came up firing. 2 precise shots. Thwack, thwack. Nico's chest blossomed with 2 small, dark circles. His body armor caught the rounds, but the kinetic impact was like being hit with a sledgehammer. He staggered back, gasping, right into the shattered frame of the window. He teetered there for a half-second, the 70-story drop yawning behind him. He looked down, he looked at Maeve, and then he fell. He didn't scream. He was just gone, eaten by the storm. One left. Dimitri was exposed. His cover was gone. His tech guy was gone. It was just him and her. He dropped his now empty rifle and drew his combat knife, the same kind Mikhail had carried. At the same time, Maeve's Glock clicked. Empty. She had used her last round on Nico. They stood 30 feet apart, the wind howling between them, whipping rain and debris through the ruined restaurant. "It always comes down to this, doesn't it, Koshka?" Dimitri said, dropping into a low, menacing knife fighter's stance. "Just you and me. The old way. It's over, Dimitri. Volkov lost." "Volkov never loses," he hissed, and charged. The final fight was not a brawl. It was a ballet of violence, a high-speed chess match between 2 grandmasters of death. Dimitri was a bull, all power, rage, and forward momentum. He was armored, helmeted, and driven by a fanatic's devotion to his general. Maeve was Koshka, the cat, all speed, grace, and tactical brilliance. She was unarmored, bleeding from her arm, and driven by a desperate, primal need to survive. He lunged with the knife, a powerful, straight thrust aimed at her center mass. Maeve didn't block. She redirected. She moved with his attack, her left hand catching his wrist, not to stop it, but to guide it. She twisted, using his own momentum to pull him past her, while her right hand, holding the now empty Glock by its barrel, slammed the heavy steel grip into his temple. The clang of steel on ballistic helmet was loud. He roared, his 280-pound armored frame barely slowed. He spun, his elbow swinging back in a vicious arc that would have crushed her skull. Maeve was already gone. She had ducked under his swing, moving behind him. She kicked the back of his knee, trying to buckle the joint. It was like kicking a steel girder. His armor held. He spun again, the knife flashing. This time it caught her. The blade sliced across her apron, cutting a deep gash in her thigh. Maeve hissed in pain, stumbling back. She felt the warm blood instantly soak her black slacks. "You're slow, Koshka," Dimitri taunted, advancing. "The civilian life has made you soft." He lunged again. Maeve threw the empty Glock at his face. It was a desperate, useless gesture, but it made him flinch. In that half-second, Maeve grabbed a chair, a heavy, $3,000 oak dining chair, and swung it with all her strength at his knees. The chair shattered, but the impact finally did what her kick couldn't. It broke his stance. He stumbled. Maeve was on him. She didn't try to punch his armor. She went for the gaps. She jammed 2 fingers into the gap at his throat, just under the helmet line, digging for the carotid artery. He gagged, swatting her hand away. She drove her palm into his side, just under the armor plating, striking his floating rib. He grunted. The wind knocked out of him. He was strong, but she was faster. She was attacking him from 3 angles at once, a flurry of strikes to his joints, his throat, his eyes. He roared in frustration and grabbed her, pulling her into a brutal bear hug. His arms, corded with muscle, clamped down. He was trying to crush her ribs. Maeve felt her breath leaving her. Black spots danced in her vision. She was trapped. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She looked past his helmet and saw Arthur Pierce, still on the floor, watching with wide, terrified eyes. "Pierce!" she gurgled, the word barely escaping her lips. He just stared. "The detonator!" she gasped, her lungs on fire. "Get it!" The detonator. It was still hanging from Nico's vest, which was gone, fallen into the night. No, not that one. The other one. Nico had dropped his detonator. But the charge, the C4, was still on the wall. And the other detonator. Dimitri had one too, on his own vest. A backup. Dimitri saw her eyes flick to his chest. He smiled behind his mask. "Yes, little cat. Plan B. If I die, the timer starts. 30 seconds. We all go together." He was squeezing. Her ribs were at the breaking point. "No, can't win. Not like this." She stopped fighting. She went completely, utterly limp. It was a classic counter. Her sudden dead weight surprised him, shifting his center of gravity. He stumbled, trying to readjust his grip on her corpse. The moment his grip loosened, she exploded. She drove her head backward, slamming her skull into his masked face. He recoiled. She stomped her heel down, crushing the small, unarmored bones of his foot. He howled in pain, and, for the first time, his grip broke. Maeve scrambled away, gasping for air, her side on fire. Dimitri recovered, his rage absolute. He ripped the backup detonator from his vest. "That's it! We all die!" He raised it, his thumb going for the switch. "Pierce, now!" Maeve screamed. Arthur Pierce, the man who had never done a difficult thing in his life, the man who commanded armies of lawyers and bankers, finally moved. He didn't do much. He didn't attack. He just scrambled. He crawled, crab-like, right into Dimitri's path, grabbing onto his armored leg. "No, please, please, I'll pay you. I have—" "Get off me, you maggot!" Dimitri bellowed, kicking at him. It was all Maeve needed. Dimitri was distracted, his balance compromised by the terrified billionaire clinging to his ankle. Maeve ran at him. But she wasn't aiming for Dimitri. She was aiming for the wall behind him. She sprinted, launched herself off the velvet-covered wall of the booth, and used the momentum to pivot in midair. She brought both legs around in a devastating, flying scissor kick. She locked her legs around his neck, just as he was turning back to her. Her weight, combined with his turn, created a perfect storm of torque. She clamped down, cutting off his air and his blood. He grabbed at her legs, trying to pry them off, but she held on, her muscles burning, her vision graying from the pain in her leg. "Go to hell," she whispered. Dimitri gurgled. He clawed at his helmet, then at her, then at the air. He was top-heavy, armored and off-balance. He took one staggering step back, then another. His heel hit the edge of the broken window frame. For a moment, they were frozen in a grotesque tableau, the waitress locked like a vice around the assassin's neck, the billionaire clinging to his foot. Dimitri's eyes, wide with sudden realization, met hers through the mask. Maeve just stared, her gaze as cold as the November wind, and then she twisted, and he was gone. He fell backward into the night, a 280-pound anchor of armor and hate, disappearing into the storm. Maeve released him at the last second, pushing off the window frame and collapsing back onto the floor. She landed hard, her body screaming in protest. Silence. The only sound was the wind, the rain, and the quiet, hiccuping sobs of Arthur Pierce. The room was still. The bankers, the judge, Mr. Henderson, all frozen. Maeve pushed herself up, her leg threatening to buckle. She limped over to the wall. There, just as she'd thought, was the C4. But it wasn't just a block. It was a sophisticated device with a timer, and the timer was active. A small red LED display read 0029. Dimitri's backup detonator wasn't just a trigger. It was a dead man's switch. His fall had started the final countdown. 028. 027. The small red numbers were a death sentence for everyone on the 70th floor. Maeve's mind, which had been a raging inferno of combat adrenaline, snapped back into the cold, clear focus of a demolitions expert. She'd been trained by Volkov's best. She knew this device. It was a Scylla, a double fail-safe incendiary device, designed to burn hot enough to destroy all evidence, including DNA. "My God! Is it—" Pierce stammered, crawling over. "Shut up!" Maeve snapped. She ripped a silver steak knife from a nearby table. "I need light. Your phone. Now." It's dead. You—" He gestured uselessly. "You were getting me a charger." "Useless," she spat. She looked around. Her eyes landed on the Patek Philippe watch on the floor, the one from the banker at table 12. She snatched it up. The dial glowed with faint luminescence. It was just enough. Autos 21. Auto 20. She used the tip of the steak knife to pry the cover off the device. Inside was a complex nest of wires. Red, blue, green, yellow, and 2 thin silver wires. "It's a logic trap," her training screamed. "Cut the wrong wire and it detonates. Cut the right wire and the second wire detonates. It's designed to be unbeatable." Warau 42. Warau 14. She remembered her training with Volkov in that dark, cold bunker. "Don't think like a soldier, Koshka. Think like an engineer. What is the one thing a machine cannot account for? The human element." The device was designed to be disarmed only by the person who armed it, via a wireless signal. Any tampering would trigger it. "You can't cut the wires," Pierce whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm not going to cut the wires," Maeve said. 009, 008. She ignored the wires. She jammed the tip of the steak knife under the logic board itself, the green and gold circuit board. "What are you—" "It's triggered by a pressure plate under the board," she explained, her voice a strained whisper, her hands perfectly steady despite the blood loss. "If I cut a wire, the circuit breaks. If I lift the board, the primary contact breaks, but the secondary contact, the anti-tamper, remains live." 0.2005. "So what's the plan?" Pierce was hysterical. "I have to pry the board up and break the secondary contact in the same quarter second." 0.004. She wedged the knife in. 0.003. She took a deep breath. 0.002. She twisted. There was a snap of plastic and a fzzzt sound as the circuits shorted. 0.001. The red numbers froze. 0.0. The display went dark. Silence. The bomb was disarmed. Maeve leaned her head against the wall, closing her eyes for just a single second. The adrenaline began to recede, and in its place, a tidal wave of pain crashed over her. Her arm, her leg, her ribs. Everything hurt. She heard sirens, far, far below but climbing. The jammer, tied to Nico's power source, was gone. The outside world was rushing back in. She opened her eyes. Arthur Pierce was staring at her, his expression a mixture of awe, terror, and something she'd never seen on his face. Respect. Who are you?" he whispered. Maeve looked at him. The billionaire titan, covered in dust, his $5,000 suit ripped, his hands still tied. She pushed herself off the wall and limped over to him. She used the steak knife to cut his zip ties. He rubbed his wrists, wincing. You saved us. You saved me. My company. I'll give you anything. $1 million. 10 million. Name it. A new life. Anything." Maeve looked at this man who believed money could solve a problem like this. A problem like her. She was Maeve the waitress. She was Agent 714. She was Koshka. And now, thanks to him, she was compromised. Volkov knew she was alive. He would send another team, and another. Her life here, her quiet, invisible life, was over. She looked down at the $120,000 Patek Philippe watch, still in her hand. "You're a terrible tipper, Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice flat. She slid the watch onto her own wrist, the cold gold a heavy, strange weight. "My God!" Mr. Henderson was whimpering from the bar. "Maeve, what? Maeve didn't look at him. She didn't look at any of them. Their world of menus and wine pairings was a dream. She was awake now. She tore off her blood-stained apron and threw it on the floor. She started walking, not to the main entrance, but back toward the kitchen. "Wait," Pierce called out. "Where are you going? The police will be here. You're a hero." Maeve paused at the kitchen door, her back to him. "No, Mr. Pierce," she said, the wind catching her hair. "I'm just the waitress." She pushed through the swing doors, past the horrified kitchen staff, past the cooling body of Mikhail, and to the service elevator at the far back. She pressed the button. The doors opened. She stepped inside, just as the first, heavy thud of police boots echoed from the main dining room. The doors slid shut, and the ghost was gone. The sirens fade, but her story is just beginning. Maeve is gone, and Koshka is back in the wind, hunted by her past and armed with a billionaire's watch. The line between predator and prey has been erased, and the battle for her survival has only just started. If you need to know what happens next, and if you love stories where the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous, then show your support. Don't be a ghost. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a good twist, and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Your support is the only thing that will bring Koshka out of the shadows for part 2. Let us know in the comments. What would you have done?